Living in America means living with the fear of gun violence every day. Last Saturday, a ballroom full of government officials, including the president, journalists, dignitaries, and other guests at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, came face to face with that reality. After a gunman breached security outside the event, President Trump offered a solution. It was not gun safety measures or a plan to reduce access to firearms. Instead, he used the shooting to justify and speed up the construction of his high-security, reinforced White House ballroom, saying the next morning, quote, "It cannot be built fast enough," end quote. While Trump touts a $400 million fortress meant to insulate the elite from the very world that they govern, the rest of the country is left out in the open. Consider what it's like for American school children these days. We are only 5 months into 2026, and there have been at least 32 incidents of gunfire on school grounds. 14 people have been killed, 15 people have been wounded. That's according to data from Everytown for Gun Safety. If we broaden that out to include gunfire deaths outside of schools, so far this year, the Gun Violence Archives has recorded 343 children killed by firearms, 910 injuries. Gun violence is a fixture of American childhood. Far too many children have experienced shootings at school, and all of them, every single student in America, lives with the threat of one hanging over them. Because over the past 30 years, mass school shootings have become commonplace, and our government has taken no meaningful action to stop them. There have been plenty of attempts at gun control over the years, efforts largely championed by Democrats and opposed by Republicans, none that have been successful enough to stop this all-too-American experience from happening. And while the political will in Washington has withered, the moral urgency remains. It's carried forward in large part by those who have already paid the highest price imaginable. Two of those people join me now. Fred Guttenberg is a gun control activist and the author of multiple books, including American Carnage, Shattering the Myths That Fuel Gun Violence. His 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, was one of the 17 victims of the 2018 Parkland, Florida school shooting. Friends and family said Jamie was compassionate, happy, and energetic, loved to dance, and dreamed of going into pediatrics. Nicole Hockley is the CEO of Sandy Hook Promise, a nonprofit dedicated to preventing gun violence at schools. Her 6-year-old son, Dylan, was among the 20 first graders and 6 staff members who were killed in the 2012 shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. Dylan is described as being full of innocence and joy and would flap his arms when he got excited, pretending to be a butterfly. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Nicole, this is an important conversation because a whole lot of attention for at least a hot second was spent on the fact that a whole lot of influential people were in a room where somebody apparently intended to do harm. And I think for people like you and Fred, sometimes that must get frustrating that, boy, that gets into the headlines. But people continue to die every single day because of gun violence, and it sort of gets shuffled off.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating to think that people only think about preventing gun violence when it actually has touched them and directly impacted them. And the people that, all the attendees that were at the dinner last weekend, have now a shared experience with millions of Americans and especially school children across the country with this ever-present fear. So there is a real opportunity for them to use that experience to amplify and elevate solutions and not just focus on what we could have done from a security standpoint, but what we could do to prevent these acts from happening in the first place.
Right, because we can ultimately secure the Hilton in Washington. Doesn't solve most of the problems. Fred, you and I were texting last Sunday as we were covering this, and you said, you posted on Blue Sky, leaders last night experienced what it feels like to be a student in school dealing with an active shooter. Unfortunately, the current occupant of the White House is delivering the wrong message from last night. We don't need a ballroom sales job. We need a determination to end gun violence. Now, I understand that Donald Trump's obsessed with the ballroom, and he talks about it at every opportunity, but it's fundamentally disconnected to suggest that somehow the solution to what happened last Saturday night is a secure ballroom.
Correct. And first, good morning, Ali, and good morning, Nicole. Ali, you know how I feel about this, which is I won't even focus on him. I only will focus on his enablers, because you are correct. It is an intentional misdirection focused on the wrong thing. And I believe firmly, just before this segment, you had a segment on We the People. Behind me is a photo of my daughter dancing over my shoulders and the sign We the People, because I believe they are connected. We the people hold the power. We have a superpower. It's called our right to vote. Unfortunately, I don't believe those who should have gotten the right message last week will. until after the next election, when we show up and vote in overwhelming numbers. And the messages that we can send, the earthquake we can send, just Florida, for example, we can elect David Jolly as governor. We can elect Alex Vindman as senator. We can elect JJR as our next attorney general. And here in the state of Florida, why does that matter? We currently have an attorney general who, by not defending the law of the land here, forced open carry to be the law of the land months ago because he refused to defend the state in a lawsuit. These elections matter. We, the people, have a superpower, and we need to use it.
So, Nicole, there are two things. The elections matter, and we're seeing remarkable participation in elections this year. Turnout, protests matter, March for Our Lives mattered. And there are lots of things that have happened. The influence of the movement to implement some sort of sanity in gun ownership in this country has had an impact. Fundraising exceeds now that of the NRA. The NRA is a shell of an organization now. What can happen next to actually make meaningful change to gun violence in America?
Well, I think the most important thing in capitalizing on the statement, we the people, it's about the people. I don't think this is about just what regulation can do or what policy can do, because we know that that is part of the solution, but a bigger part of the solution is prevention. When we learn how to recognize the signs, when we destigmatize mental health, when we ensure appropriate access and reduce ease of access to someone who is in distress or in crisis, those are important things. And that's something that we, the people, can all do. We don't need a politician to tell us how to recognize the sign. Security is the last line of defense. We, the people, preventing violence, helping each other, recognizing signs and intervening, that is the first line of defense. And our culture is so focused on reaction, not on prevention. We, the people, need to change that narrative.
Fred, you engage a great deal with people who don't share your view on this, and you're trying to say this is an important national conversation. It can't just be polarized like everything else that happens. Has that worked? Is that working?
It did work. In fact, during the Biden years, we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act because we, the people, voted. We had an Office of Gun Violence Prevention because we, the people, voted. We had a functioning effort to do something about gun violence that resulted in the lowest gun violence rates in a long time over the past 2 years. So it did work. Unfortunately, this year we have an administration and his enablers that are undoing all of that. In fact, everybody's focused on the ballroom this week. What people maybe missed is Todd Blanche saying this week that they are going to tear apart all of the work, even the work that we got passed through Congress with the Safer Communities Act. They're going to tear it all up. Okay, so they took from what happened last weekend the message that they want to undo all of gun violence prevention. We, the people, are pissed, and we, the people, can do something about that. And this election is less than 7 months away, and we will.
The frustrating part, and it must be, Nicole, I can't get into your or Fred's heads. I can't even imagine how, and we've all been talking for years, the three of us. I don't know how you do it, and I'm so grateful that you do. But to Fred's point, this happened on Wednesday, 4 days after the shooting. The Justice Department rolled back these gun regulations. Among the 30 changes announced Wednesday is the proposed repeal, as Fred just said, of a 2024 Biden administration rule that sought to force thousands more firearms dealers across the U.S. to run background checks on buyers at gun shows or other places outside brick and mortar stores. These are not weird things. These are not weird going to people's houses and grabbing your gun things. This is hey, if I got to go to a shop and get a background check to get a gun, shouldn't I do that if I buy a gun in a parking lot or at a gun show?
Absolutely. And these rollbacks are, it's really challenging when we talk about, when people talk about this as a mental health issue, which we know it's not, but then they cut funding for mental health support. When we talk about, this is about ensuring that only the good guys have guns. Well, these rollbacks make it much easier for people that are in crisis or with intent to harm to access those firearms and harder to prevent the next tragedy. I know that there is a small amount of people that think, regardless, your Second Amendment right means that you should have access to a firearm no matter what. I don't think that represents the majority of Americans. Most people think if you are intent on suicide or violence to others, in that moment, you should not have access to firearms. So these policy rollbacks are, again, focused, make it so much harder to prevent the next tragedy, and also don't make a lot of sense because I don't think it's in tune with what most Americans want or feel.
I appreciate both of you. Thank you for your time this morning. Fred Gutenberg is a gun control activist. He's the author of American Carnage, Shattering the Myths That Fuel Gun Violence. Nicole Hockley is the CEO of Sandy Hook Promise.